Hey there, welcome back again. Thanks for joining me. So several months ago, as you know, we brought you a cost of living comparison between the places where a lot of folks are moving from and Cedar City, where a lot of folks are moving to. And we did a West Coast version last week. We had a number of subscribers who requested an East Coast version. We don't have quite as many people moving from the East Coast to Southern Utah, but we do have a significant enough number that I am going to bring it to you today. You guys get an update on the East Coast cost of living with a dash of some Midwest thrown in for good measure. Stick with me. Okay, so as we talked about last time, I am subscribed to the Council for Community and Economic Research, which provides this data. And because I like you guys and because you need to have good data when you're making decisions, right? So now I get this quarterly report from these folks and I get to nerd out with all of this cool data and you guys get to come along with me. So the cost of living index measures the relative price for consumer goods, services in participating areas. The average for all the participating places, both metropolitan and non-metropolitan, equals 100, okay? And each city's index is read as a percentage of the average for all of the places. The index does not measure inflation, and of course we've been dealing with inflation pretty significantly for the last few months, but each quarterly report is a separate comparison of prices at that moment in time. So it's comparing prices from one location to the other, not historically from one point in time to another. So are you curious about how much it costs to live in Cedar City relative to places on the East Coast and places in the Midwest? We're going to explore groceries, utilities, healthcare costs, and of course, the reason you're here, housing. Okay, so I picked out just a few cities where we've had some folks moving from those areas to Cedar City. We're going to talk about Tampa, Florida, Chicago, Illinois, Detroit, Michigan, and I picked two places in New York because what I have found looking over this data is if you pull the numbers from the larger metropolitan areas, they are just so high, like it blows my mind. If you're pulling numbers from some of the more rural areas, it's actually a lot more affordable. I am not going to give an opinion as to why that is, although you know I have one. I'm just not going to share it here. But anyway, I'm going to give you two cities in New York. I'm going to give you New York, New York, and Rochester. And I'll tell you a little story about Rochester here in just a minute. So we're going to compare those areas' cost of living index to Cedar City. Let's go. All right. Composite index, of course, is 100% of all of the cities that are a part of this study. And then each individual city that I'm talking about is higher or lower relative to what that composite index is. Okay. Tampa, Florida. Tampa, Florida, you are only at 100.9. So you are almost exactly at the composite average for your entire composite index. Chicago, you're at 117%. Detroit, you're only at 104. I thought that was interesting. I expected Detroit to be higher. Now, New York, New York. If you live in New York, you have a composite index of 237.6. So that's not quite on par with San Francisco that we talked about last week, but it's still really high. All right, now if you are not in New York, but you are in Rochester, New York, you are actually below the composite index. You're at 99. And of course, Cedar City is coming in at 97.9. Okay, let's talk about groceries. So groceries are 17% of this composite index, right? Tampa, Florida, your grocery costs are a little high, 109.9, so almost 110% of the composite index. Chicago, you're at 106.4. Detroit, you're below that composite index. You're at 98.7. New York, you're at 126, which I actually thought it might be higher for groceries, but you're only at 126% of the index. Now, Rochester, this is interesting, 95.9. So you're significantly below that composite index. And actually, Cedar City is higher on groceries at 98.5. Still below that composite index of 100, but yeah, Cedar City is 98.5. Okay, housing. Housing is 30% of the total of this composite index. So it carries a lot of weight in this index. Tampa, Florida, you are at 100.2. So again, you're almost exactly at the composite index level. Chicago, 148.9. I think we can safely call that 149% in housing at the composite index. Detroit, you're at 108.8. 109% of the composite index. New York, you guys just guess what New York's housing costs are. 491.2%, almost 500% of the composite index. I just thought that was absolutely crazy. And then you go to Rochester, it's 97.5. So, Cedar City, we're at 96.3. So relatively speaking, our housing costs here are not bad. They've gone up just like every place else has gone up, but our housing costs are still only 96.3% of that composite index. Now, when we're talking about housing, I told you I was going to tell you a story about Rochester. We had some folks came out a few months ago, and they were actually from Rochester, New York, and they could not get over it. They kept talking about how beautiful this area is, the amazing mountains, the incredible colors. And of course, you know, if you've been here, if you've watched my videos, you know that this is true. But it was so interesting to have someone who was from the concrete jungle and just talking about how cool it was just to see mountains everywhere you look. And I was like, yeah, I know, it's why we live here. Anyway, Rochester, New York, I'm sure it's a lovely place, but we had some of your folks out here and they like Cedar City better. I'm just saying, it wasn't me, it was them. Okay, let's continue on. Utility costs. Tampa, Florida, you are below this composite index. You are at 96.3. That's pretty good, right? Chicago, you're at 96.7, Detroit, 96.6, New York, shockingly, is above the index, but not by much. You're at 102.3. Rochester at 92.3, and Cedar City is still below that composite index. We are at 95.5. Let's skip to some groceries. How much is it gonna cost you to get a steak? How much are you gonna have to pay for a dozen eggs? Everybody needs eggs. Loaf of bread, and I don't know, are you interested in how much a box of Kleenex cost? That's in this report. I just thought it was funny that they track the cost of Kleenexes. Okay, and then we're going to talk about housing when I'm done giving you the grocery information. So Tampa, Florida, steak is going to cost you $14.38 a pound. Chicago, $16.49. Detroit, $14.21. New York is almost the lowest. Why would a steak only be $13.99 in New York? I don't know. That's just what the index says. Rochester is 13.89. Cedar City is 14.87. So a steak in Cedar City actually costs more than a steak in New York. Now, that is not a prepared steak at a restaurant. That is a steak you get at the grocery store and bring home and cook your own self. Okay, dozen eggs. Tampa, $3.31. Chicago, $3.32. Detroit, $2.95. Why is it only $2.95 in Detroit? Are there more chickens? I don't know. New York, $4.18. Rochester, only $3.58. And Cedar City, $3.39. Okay, Kleenexes. I just thought this was funny that this is something that's tracked, but it is. If you have allergies, if you get a little cold and you need to buy a box of Kleenexes in Tampa, you're gonna pay $2.43. Chicago, you could buy Kleenexes there for $1.67. Detroit, $1.77. Why are Kleenexes so cheap in Detroit and Chicago? I find that hilarious. New York, $2.79. Rochester, $2.13. And Cedar City, Kleenexes are $2.42. Now, the reason you're here, housing prices. Let's talk about this. Okay, Tampa, Florida. Now, in our last video, I told you guys I'm talking in averages right now, which I don't usually like to do when we're talking about housing prices. I like to talk in terms of the median, because the median is going to be exactly in the middle. If you lay out all of the houses, that's going to tell you right where the middle of the pack is. If we're talking in terms of averages, which is the data that I have here, it tends to skew a little high. Just understand that. So I'm going to give you these housing prices, but then I'm going to give you the Cedar City median price so that you have just a really good understanding of what the market is doing here. Okay, Tampa, Florida, your average housing cost is $430,730. I thought that was interesting. I expected it to be higher. In Chicago, it's about $570,000. In Detroit, it's just over $500,000. Guess what it is in New York? $2,532,750. That's the average cost of a house in New York, New York. Just like, how do you even do that? I don't know. Okay, Rochester, this is interesting. Your average is $449,543. So you're at about $450,000. Now in Cedar City, our average as reported by this organization is $478,000. Now, I'm going to tell you the median price right now is still under $400,000. It's $399,000 as I'm recording this on this particular day at the end of November. Of course, that fluctuates, but that is the median price right now. We're still below $400,000. We're at $399,000. So I want to hear from folks on the East Coast. I want to hear from folks in the Midwest. Does this track with you? Is this kind of what you're seeing? Why is Rochester so inexpensive? That was a surprise to me. So thank you for exploring all of these numbers with me. I think we have demonstrated yet again that the Cedar City area is an absolutely amazing place to call home. Please let me know if you have any questions. My team and I would love to be a resource for you. Now make sure you're subscribed and hit that notification bell, because we've got some really fun content coming up in the next few weeks. I think you guys are really going to like it. Have a good one. I am Jennie Hendricks. We'll see you soon.